This scene depicts a moment from my real life I'll never forget. I was working for the Department of Homeland Security out of Calexico, California, and I can tell you firsthand that the only reason we were able to save this precious little boy was due to the fact that they had to take him across the border at a port of entry checkpoint because the border walls compelled them to do so. The horrors a child faces as a victim of human trafficking demand that we take action. A child can be sold up to 20 times a day, 6 days a week, for 10 years or even longer, depending when the abuse began. Just in 2022 alone, immigration authorities encountered more than 152,000 unaccompanied minors at or near the U.S.-Mexico border, representing an all-time high. I believe every member of this committee and people everywhere can agree that human trafficking is a plague and an evil that must be eradicated. Evidence of this can be seen in the response to the movie Sound of Freedom, based on my life story, which has been a surprise box office success and is sparking a national conversation on child sex slavery and trafficking, the fastest growing criminal enterprise on the planet. The conclusions I offer in this testimony are based on my professional experience as an anti-trafficking operator. After starting my professional career with the CIA, I transferred to the Department of Homeland Security. At DHS, I spent 12 years as a special agent and undercover operator for Homeland Security investigations. After leaving the federal government, I have continued the fight against human trafficking, first as the founder and CEO of the organization Operation Underground Railroad, and now as a senior advisor to the Spear Fund, which is an organization that funds and collaborates with experts, organizations, and concerned citizens around the globe to fight and end human trafficking. Traffickers use our southern border to bring slaves into our country for the sex industry because the United States is one of the highest consumers in child sex abuse material in the world. Our federal agents who work at the southern border are women and men of the highest integrity and dedication. Yet despite the hard work and success of agents on the ground, one thing has become vividly clear. Poor U.S. border security and broken U.S. policy are feeding the growth of human trafficking in the United States. One way this is seen is the absence of physical barriers on our border. I have personally seen how ports of entry were responsible for helping rescue a child, catch a sexual predator, and start a chain of events that rescued multiple children from his abuse. On the other hand, I've spoken with survivors who were trafficked by cartels, taking advantage of the miles of unprotected U.S. border. In one case in particular, a young woman was brought across the border at an area where no barriers or protections existed. Once in the U.S., she was sold and raped for money up to 30 to 40 times a day for 5 years before eventually escaping herself. She shared with me the tragic conclusion that had her captors been forced to attempt a crossing into our country at the port of entry, just like the little boy you saw in the film, that she would have had a better chance of being rescued. But the success we've seen in interdicting human trafficking at points of entry means nothing if our immigration policies allow traffickers to flaunt legal loopholes. Recently, members of Congress sounded the alarm on information that the government has lost track of 85,000 minors that crossed the border unaccompanied. And the New York Times reported that the Department of Health and Human Services has lost contact with thousands of children who were released to sponsors that are now, and these children are now feared of being risk for exploitation. Just in May alone, U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered an average of 435 unaccompanied minors per day. These children are prime targets for traffickers for sex or labor. Tragically, as a result of this administration's current policies, DHS and HHS have unwittingly become a child trafficking delivery service. This must stop. We must begin with finding the 85,000 missing unaccompanied children, which this administration claims is not their problem anymore. Congressman Smith's Secure Act will help find them by holding HHS, DHS, and the FBI responsible for reporting on the status of the unaccounted for children. The Secure Act will require these agencies to work together to locate them, assess their exposure to being trafficked, exploited, or abused, and to vet adults in their new homes for criminal activity. We pray all these kids will be found safe, but in my expert judgment, a significant number of them do not need to be merely found, but rescued from actual and active sexual abuse. Once we find these children and rescue those in need, we will be in a better position to reform the failed policies and processes that put them in the hands of abusers to begin with. Real freedom is not a phone number in the pocket of a child for an unknown sponsor or a dangerous trek across South and Central America. Real freedom is safety and protection from abuse and abusers for our most vulnerable population, our children, our future. Thank you.